be at a worship service this morning, and he would not be at our trustees meeting. The reason is because Russ has been a highway patrolman for many, many years, and now he's the State Bureau of Investigation personnel. But his partner for the last 7 years is dying this morning, and Russ wanted to be with him. His name is Buster. He's a canine. And this is a first for me in a pulpit setting to say something like that. But it means, and Buster, let me tell you, he will shake that SUV. You get close to it, if he don't want you there, the whole big truck he'll shake it. Tough dog. He saved Russ's life several times, multiple times, saved his life. So please remember the family, okay? In prayers this morning. And most of you, if you're like me, you know how it feels to love your pets. Let's take a few moments and just reflect in meditation and prayers, and we'll pray. Let's pray. As Jesus taught his church to pray, let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Amen. And by the way, it was mentioned to me a few weeks ago, when are we going to have a blessing of our animals, Pastor? And I said, that'll be fine. Let's do that. So let's plan it. Let's plan it. We'll be planning that some Saturday morning in the near future. We'll just have a blessing of our animals, our pets. And you can come to the church if you will. We'll do that. Or if you need them blessed at home, I can do that. Or on the phone. We've been talking about the Beatitudes for about 3 weeks. And we're going to do it, hopefully, continuously. I don't know if we'll make it through all of them or not. Today we're on the 3rd of the Beatitudes. And when I got to this one, I thought, well, I don't really want to talk about this one. But the information is there. It is so magnificent. It is so wonderful, this Beatitude about the blessed are the meek, that there's so much that needs to be said. And when you talk about meekness, most of us would have to fall into the category of practice what you preach, or maybe you need to listen to it's very hard. It's very hard to be the person or to practice meekness in a world that promotes something else. Okay? Now, we're going to read this text the same way we've been reading all of them for the last few weeks. You see the title of our message this morning. That is your responsive reading this morning. I'm going to read the opening 2 verses of the 5th chapter of Matthew, and then you'll read the 5th verse, and it's right there. It's the title of our message this morning. Okay? When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him, and he began to teach and taught them, saying, Blessed are ye, for they shall inherit the earth. This is the word of God for the people of God, and thanks be to God. Well, as we mentioned with our children a few moments ago, using the illustration of an echo. An echo. Well, that's really more than just an illustration. Because usually what goes around comes around. Usually. And if you practice a life of hatred, chances are hatred will come back in many different ways. Love, chances are it will come back in many different ways. Not altogether a given. That's just not an absolute every time. But chances are things will work out that way. If you give the world your best, maybe the best will come back to you. And I say maybe. Chances are it will if you give your best. Now, Jesus could have meant that and many other things in this text. This beatitude. We all know that life really doesn't work this way, though. You know that? We can say, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. But does it really work that way? Well, or maybe, what is it that gets the attention, if not the squeaky wheel? Which wheel is going to get the grease? The aggressive, the self-confident, the self-asserting, the self-advertising, the self-grandizing, the self-centered, the selfish? You think? We have a very hard time even believing this text. Now, we all accept it. Boy, it sounds good. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. One person put it this way. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. By golly, that's the only way they're going to get it. Think about it. To inherit it. The idea is so out of step with our culture and Western civilization. And I believe in Western civilization. I believe in Western thought. I believe in Christianity and what Western thought has promoted. But also with its growth has come a really righteous people. Self-centered people looking out for number one, numero uno. Me, myself, and I. Me and mine. In the Talmud, there is actually a Jewish prayer that goes like this. Lord, if only two people go to heaven, let them be me and my son. And Lord, if only one goes to heaven, let them be me. That's pretty selfish, isn't it? Jesus may have had this in mind when he delivered the Sermon on the Mount. Listen to this text from the 37th Psalm, the 11th verse. Jesus may very well have been thinking about this psalm when he gave us this beautiful beatitude. But the meek shall inherit the earth and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace. Isn't that beautiful? That's not the words of Jesus, that's the words of the psalmist. And it is believed that maybe Jesus was reflecting on that psalm when he was delivering the Sermon on the Mount, this portion of the Beatitudes. Or maybe he was also thinking, he could have been thinking of Numbers, the 12th chapter, the 11th verse, when Moses is identified this way. The man Moses was very meek above all the people which were upon the face of the earth. Good grief. Did you ever think about Moses and the psalmist in that fashion, having that degree of integrity? Moses or the psalmist. And then if that's meekness, then Lord, let us be meek. Like the psalmist and like Moses. And this is really the point of the text. So let's take it and look at it a little closer. Let's look at this word, humility. My goodness, it's so out of step with modern thought and modern culture, but the meek are those who are humble before God. Now, I had to add that before God, because trying to be humble before one another sometimes is a little more than we can handle. You know, if you act too meek, they're going to kick you in the teeth. The meek are those who are humble before God. Now, I don't know if what I'm about to say is original or not, but this is my definition of meekness. I'd love for you to write it down if you want to. I think it's good. Meekness has nothing to do with the lack of assertiveness. It has everything to do with your posture towards God. Think about it. Being macho doesn't make you a man. Let me repeat that. Meekness has nothing to do with the lack of assertiveness. It has everything to do with our posture toward God. Let me give you a real-life illustration. I have a couple of them this morning. Here's a good one. The student. The student goes before her Eastern teacher. And the student was very clever, very smart, very creative, very wonderful, but something was missing in her life. So she goes and she shares her story with this Eastern philosopher, this Eastern teacher. And she talks about all of her accomplishments, all the things she's done, and how she's kind of empty. And the Eastern teacher says, "Would you like to have a cup of tea?" She says, "Sure." So she takes the cup of tea, and the teacher starts pouring tea in and just pours it in and just runs over the cup, keeps running over. And she says, "Teacher, the cup is running over. It's running over. You're spilling the tea. My cup is full." And he said, "Therein is your problem. Your cup, your life is so full of what you want to do, of self-grandization, self-importance, narcissism. Your life is so full of you, there's really no room for God or anything else. That may be the problem." Many people come to God with their cups full, but they're wanting blessings. Oh, they want God to pour out this or pour out that for them, make them feel whoopee good spiritually. But their cups are already filled to the brim with their own aspirations, their own accomplishments, their own great and good ideas. What is God to do when there's no room for Him in your heart? It's so full of other things. I mean, good things. Are we to empty our cup of our own desires? You think? Everyone here, you know Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris burned last year. I remember right here, Christmas Eve night, delivering Holy Communion and telling the story of this being the first time since the French Revolution that they had not had the cathedral there open for communion on Christmas Eve. It's the first time because it burned last year. And it's being restored even as we speak. Here's an interesting story about that cathedral. It was built right after the Middle Ages, and it took 182 years to build the cathedral. The people that started building it, the architects that started, were not the ones that finished it. It took that long to build a beautiful cathedral. Now here's something very interesting about it. This is not trivia, so this is not just a word, something to remember that way. It's very important. In the cathedral, the sanctuary, this is the sanctuary. This is the nave. Not trying to teach a lesson this morning. This is just all churches fit into the category, so the cathedrals. This is the sanctuary, right up here, because it's where the altar is. The altar has always been where the sanctuary, is always where the altar is. What separates the altar from the nave, usually, or the sanctuary from the nave, is a rail. Usually a kneeling rail. Okay, there it is. This is called a nave. nautical term that comes, we get the word navy from it. In a great ship, this is where the cargo is kept. This is the great precious cargo that's kept in the nave of a ship, or the nave of a church. Okay? Sanctuary, nave. Did you know in the great cathedral in Paris, the sanctuary is built off kilter, off plumb to the nave? Now those great architects did it on purpose. They made this part not just perfectly in line with the rest of the sanctuary. This one is in perfect line, you see. The sanctuary, the nave. But Notre Dame is built differently. It's off kilter a little bit. Now, why did they do that is the question. It's because those masons, those architects, those individuals that built the great cathedral, took 182 years to build it. They wanted to make sure everybody knew that nobody is perfect. No place is perfect. Only God is perfect. And you think about that. Think about that when we talk about humility. Blessed are the meek. Being macho doesn't make you a man. Today we put a lot of famous people on pedestals and we sometimes ignore their faults. Contrast this story, or think about this story. It was a large hospital. And this one doctor, he was so good in this hospital, and all the students would study under him. He was a great physician, he was a great surgeon, and before every operation, he would take a few moments to himself. He just had to do this. Every surgery, every operation, take a few moments to himself. One day, one of his interns asked him, "What are you doing while you're by yourself?" He says, "I pray. I pray. I'm preparing myself for the surgery. I offer prayer to God." Because he said, not every time, but sometimes when I'm performing surgery, sometimes things happen that were not planned. Sometimes an artery is cut. Sometimes a vein pops. Sometimes something happens that I'm not prepared for. So I pray, and I pray for God to give me that knowledge to know exactly what to do when that happens. I pray for that. And he says that to this day, God's always provided an answer in that crisis situation. That's why I take time to pray before every surgery. Doctors, like everyone else. I remember my daughter being in Lamar Hospital for 2 different occasions, several weeks. And we saw dozens and dozens of doctors while we were there. And let me tell you, I saw some of the most humble, beautiful human beings you'll ever meet were physicians. And I also saw some of the most arrogant, self-righteous little gods with small g that I've ever seen also. I mean, that's not just true with physicians. It's true with ministers. It's true with teachers. It's true with nurses and doctors and factory workers and butchers and bakers and candlestick makers and everyone. The meek are the humble before God. They recognize that life is a partnership between you and God. The meek are those who will inherit the earth. And that's a very submissive thing. The meek are those who submit to God's will. Now here's a very interesting term also. The Greek word, this is great. The Greek word for meek is pris. And I may mispronounce it. It's in English, it's P-R-A-U-S. Pris. You probably could do a better job than I can. It's the Greek word for meek. Meek. Now listen to the definition of it. It's used when wild animals are domesticated. The word pris. They're made meek. Now think about domesticated. Up until that point, you can any kind of wild animal you want to pick, whether it's a horse, a dog, a buffalo, whatever. Up until that point, it's absolutely useless, isn't it? Until it becomes prius, or until it becomes meek, until it becomes domesticated. Then it becomes very useful. Becomes meek, becomes a tool. Like Buster has been for Russ Gordon for all these years. Usable, meek. That's the Greek term for meek, prius. And that's the definition of it. Recognizing that life is a partnership between you and God. Become prius, meek. Means you're teachable. You can learn, like domesticating an animal. And who among us cannot learn a little bit or grow a little bit? This week I've been studying. I've been looking my own personal study at some of the great missionaries that served in Africa. And my goodness, it was Livingston who served in the 19th century. I mean, he navigated all those rivers and tributaries and lakes of Africa. He gave them all names too, and all of them were local native names until it came to the great falls that were the beginning of the Nile River. He named those falls after Queen Victoria. They called it Victoria Falls, the headwaters of the Nile River. By the way, the Nile River runs north. Think about it. Egypt is in the north. The Nile runs toward the north. It's very interesting. But I was reading about David Livingstone and Albert Schweitzer. Same thing. He was a medical doctor. He was a great musician. He could do so many different things. But he became a missionary in Africa. No one ever accused either one of these individuals of being weak or cowardly. They actually wrestled lions. Can you imagine? A lion attacking someone? They did, actually. But both of them were the idea of biblical meekness. Someone who's teachable, someone who can learn. Jesus called them blessed. Blessed are those individuals. They humble themselves before God and God's will. So yes, definitely Jesus was most likely thinking of the 37th Psalm that we read earlier. But the meek shall inherit the earth and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace. Jesus may very well have been thinking of that beatitude. The earth is the promised land of Canaan, the earth. Did you know in the book of Revelation there's a description of the future heaven? Future earth, future heaven? And actually it seems that the very place that heaven will be is right here. A new heaven and a new earth. Right here. Folks, we ought to take care of this good earth. It doesn't matter to me how you feel politically about some of these subjects. But it does matter how we take care of what's right around us. We went yesterday to my mother-in-law's house. We work on it every Saturday a little bit. We were on our way back home riding on 6th Highway. And the filth that was alongside the road, just the trash that people throw out. I was amazed because of where it was. Because the dignitaries that get on Highway 55 there in Memphis and come down and come over to Oxford, same way they come up from Jackson and go over to Oxford. They see all that stuff. And, hey, you know who controls that? Not the State Department of anything. It's you and me. We can control a lot of what goes out the windows. We can take care of this good earth, especially if this is where the kingdom of heaven is going to be established. Whether it is or not, it'll be up to God. Matthew is saying the meek kingdom is through Jesus Christ. So how about you? How do you fit in this area of meekness? Could you fit that definition, the Greek word, the definition of meekness? What Jesus calls blessed, pyrrhus, one that's teachable, one that can learn. It means to acknowledge your dependency on God. Good word here is humility, right? You know, you can't look at the cross without feeling a degree of humility. I don't care how good you are, how righteous you are, how honorable you are, how much you've accomplished in life, whatever. You can't look at it without having a degree of humility. When you realize what Christ did for you, it should be moving and stirring. Submit your will to God's plan for your life. If so, then, as Jesus said, you are blessed. Welcome to the kingdom. But remember the illustration we started out with a few minutes ago. Remember that? The young lady that goes before the Eastern teacher, her cup was so full, she didn't have room for anything else. Could we be that way? Righteous and good people, honorable, clever, smart folks. But could we be so full of self-importance, self-grandization, self-centeredness? Me, myself, and I. Me. Till there's no room for anything else. Then if that's the case, then blessed are you. That's all we can say. Blessed are you. But if we fulfill Jesus' definition of blessed, then you're going to inherit this and everything that goes with this. The earth, heaven, and all that goes with it. Being the presence of God forever. There's so much that goes with the word meekness, isn't it? Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. That's our beatitude for today. And may God have God's way with you and yours. And by the way, the church doors are always open. For those that would like to transfer their letter in, people making public professions of faith, receiving Christ as their Savior,